Kia ora, I'm Robin Holmes, a freshwater ecologist at the Cawthron Institute, and over the next few minutes, I'll explain how our native and introduced freshwater fisheries interact in surprising ways. New Zealand's freshwater ecosystems are under a lot of pressure, but we still have amazing native freshwater fish that support mahinga kai and fisheries, like the longfin tuna, flounder, or the lamprey, or kanakana. There are also other taonga species, such as smelt and koaro, both also valued as food, with koaro being an important species in the whitebait fishery. Alongside these native fish, introduced trout and salmon support iconic recreational fisheries across New Zealand. But for this explainer, we'll focus specifically on how koaro, smelt, and rainbow trout interact within the Te Rotorua lakes. First, here's a short history of fish in the Te lakes, shown on a graph where the fish size represents their population size. These lakes are essentially volcanic craters, so they originally had no fish. A very long time ago, mana whenua introduced koaro from neighbouring regions to create an inland fishery. It was highly productive and provided a vital source of kai for hapu for centuries. More recently, Europeans arrived with a host of non-native species, including rainbow trout. Trout were introduced into the lakes and thrived, but at the expense of koaro. Predation was so intense that trout soon became skinny as their koaro food source declined. To fix this issue, smelt, also a New Zealand native fish that can live in both freshwater lakes and estuaries, were introduced into the lakes as an alternative trout food. From a trout fisheries perspective, this worked really well. The trout population stabilised. However, koaro numbers appeared to decline even further. So, what's going on? Here's a simplified version of the Te Lake's food web. Trout are the top predator in the lake, with koaro and smelt as prey. Both koaro and smelt compete for the same food resource, zooplankton. These are the tiny creatures in the water column, just visible to the naked eye. As researchers, we were tasked with asking the question, what happens if trout numbers are reduced, say to the point where they were removed? Would this reverse koaro population declines? Would both koaro and smelt increase? Or would smelt, freed from trout predation, outcompete koaro? To investigate this, our team, led by Simon Stewart and Finbar Lee, used multiple approaches. We analysed environmental DNA from fish gut contents, assessed stabiliser ratios in fin clips to determine who eats who, and undertook fish population modelling using a variety of methods including differential equations and agent-based simulations. We then compared our predictions with real lake examples from across the country that have different combinations of these fish species. So here's another graphical summary of what we found. Currently, lakes with trout, smelt and koaro have relatively stable populations with small fluctuations. When trout numbers rise, smelt decline, and koaro sort of bounce around in between. But in all our simulations, if trout are removed completely, smelt numbers explode. They grow fast, outcompete koaro, and even eat koaro larvae, as we found out from our gut content analyses, leading ultimately to the extinction of koaro in a relatively short time period. When we looked across New Zealand, lakes with smelt but no trout also have no koaro, supporting our model predictions. So what does all this mean? Removing a predator can, somewhat counterintuitively, lead to the extinction of its own prey through indirect effects on the food web. More broadly, it shows that ecosystems are complex, and removing an introduced species won't necessarily reverse the historical changes that its introduction has created. It is important to note that this doesn't mean that removing a predator will have the same effect in a different set of lakes. This is kind of the point. Ecosystems are complicated, and even systems that appear quite similar can respond in very different ways to the same action. So, if our goal is to increase koaro resilience in lakes with both trout and smelt in them, what can we do? A pragmatic approach might be to look at how we can manage the system to rhyme with its past state, rather than faithfully represent it. The simulation modelling suggests that creating and restoring shallow wetland refuges around the edges of the lake will help boost koaro populations, as smelt and trout are not well adapted to these habitats. Similarly, creating trout-fed populations in the small headwater feeder streams with barriers could also boost koaro numbers, as these fish are able to form stable populations even in very tiny streams. As for reducing the number of trout, holding aside the effects of the value of the lake's trout fishery for a moment, if trout numbers were reduced through decreased stocking rates, this should be accompanied by very careful monitoring of the effects on koaro and other ecosystem components, because our research shows that we should be prepared for potentially surprising outcomes.